Dr. Rowan Stevens never trusted the silence of Antarctica. The ice sheets were supposed to be nature's white noise. Wind howling, strong gusts screaming down from the polar plateau. But every so often, in the brief lulls between squalls, the entire continent seemed to fall eerily mute. That hush made Rowan feel as if he'd stepped inside an empty cathedral, a cavernous, watchful stillness that swallowed his breath. He'd spent 9 overwinter seasons at McMurdo and would have sworn he was immune to jump scares. Yet the freeze-dried quiet that settled on the station that June promised something stranger than simple isolation. Even the veteran engineers dropped their voices to a whisper whenever the generators went through their infrequent maintenance shutdowns. Alone in the corridor at night, Rowan felt the throbbing chill in the pipes, but he hated the silence when it happened. It didn't feel right. Rowan was a seismologist by trade, an expert in cryoacoustic mapping. His current NSF grant focused on the tremor signatures of blue ice strata buried kilometers below sea level. Subglacial lenses of ancient, ultra-clear ice that in theory could preserve an epoch's worth of atmospheric data. Whoever located a large enough pocket first would become a darling of paleoclimatology. McMurdo's radio lab gave Rowan a corner office, and there he spent endless polar nights recalibrating arrays of buried geophones. Over the past 3 weeks, however, something had gone wrong. Multiple sensors, scattered hundreds of kilometers apart, registered a recurring, low-frequency rumble. At first, Rowan blamed fresh crevasses or distant icefalls, but the signal repeated too perfectly every 11 hours and 10 minutes, as precise as an orbital clock. He recorded the waveform, an infrasonic tremor, amplitude just below human hearing. Its power curve suggested an origin deeper than any known icequake. It was as if the entire continent was breathing, inhaling for 6 hours, exhaling for 5, pausing, and then repeating. Rowan submitted a quiet report to NSF headquarters. The answer came back: instrument error, recheck wiring. He pulled each cable by hand and tested for shorts. The pattern persisted. Then one night, he overlaid the tremor's timing on McMurdo's seismic logs. The peaks aligned perfectly, millimeter-level swelling across the Ross ice shelf. So subtle, it vanished in the normal noise of glacial creep. Together, they formed a heartbeat. It made no sense. He emailed again. This time, the NSF liaison told him to hold findings until a data integrity review. Translation: keep it quiet. 2 weeks later, cargo planes airdropped new sensors and emergency food rations, and then abruptly left. Station admin announced radio silence. No uploads, no outgoing calls except to Denver HQ. Engineers muttered about satellite interference, but Rowan caught a glance at the memo. Temporary blackout, Operation Sundown. He'd never heard of it. That same night, the oscillation in Rowan's geophones spiked. Louder, stronger, still subterranean. But when he uploaded the new files to McMurdo's local server, the signal vanished mid-render, as though it was being censored in real time. It seemed as though someone was scrubbing the data. Rowan confronted Station Chief Lennox, who offered a thin smile. Focus on your instruments, Doctor. Leave the rest to HQ. The next day, Rowan's access card no longer opened the radio lab. He borrowed a snowcat and drove out alone towards the site of Sensor 12. The deepest buried of his array, and the only one that still pinged raw data to a hidden backup on his field laptop. The sun hung below the horizon in polar twilight. In his headlights, blowing snow looks like static across an old television. 40 kilometers out, he found the sensor housing. An orange flag marking an auger hole in the flat expanse. Kneeling beside it, he listened through a contact mic. To begin with, a dull hiss of wind. Then, beneath the wind, a resonance that made his teeth itch. A sub-bass moan, tuned like an organ pipe of ice. It almost sounded biological to his ears. 2 pulses, a pause, 2 more pulses. The call and answer of something enormous and alive. His exhalation crystallized mid-air. The ground vibrated under his knees, just enough that his brain argued he'd imagined it. But the stray snowcat parked nearby quivered in sympathy. Rowan slammed the mic into his pack and turned for the cat. A dim glow, the colour of moonlit algae, seeped through the snow crust 10 meters away, as if a floodlight shone upward from the ice bed. When the glow brightened, the temperature around him rose. Rowan's faceplate fogged. He took one hesitant step closer. The ice beneath his boots cracked open. He fell. The crevasse walls were unnaturally smooth, curved like the inside of an immense throat. Rowan's headlamp flickered on fragments of something laminated within the ice. Shapes that might have been bones, long, segmented and hollow, or mechanical conduits, fossilized pipes that glinted like metal. He slid 30 feet before wedging in a narrow chute. Breathless, he scanned the walls. Embedded in the blue glow were clusters of translucent pods as big as kitchen bowls. Each held a pale embryo curled inside, twitching against amniotic gel. Rowan's light agitated them. Their insectile limbs spasmed. From below, the infrasound tremor surged into audible range. A deep exhale rumbling upward, rattling icicles loose. Rowan hammered his crampons into the ice, climbing. But his pick struck something soft. The ice gave way. An empty pod tumbled out, splitting. It smelled briny and sour. Clambering upward, he noticed charcoal streaks in the ice, shapes of letters. He scraped the frost away and gasped. Stenciled words read, United States Navy, 1963. This was no natural cavern. This shaft had been opened decades ago, then buried under a glacier's slow march. Rowan reached the surface. The glow had vanished under drifting snow. He half ran, half crawled to the snowcat, his lungs burning. The sensor array's heartbeats pounded through the ground. Louder now, a countdown accelerating. He radioed McMurdo. No response. Lights blinked across the horizon. The station's floodlights flicker-strobed, then faded. In the darkness, he heard distant machinery, rotors chopping frigid air. Thinking out loud, he wondered if they were evacuation choppers. And a deeper noise, a titanic splintering, as if the continent's crust itself was cracking open. He threw the snowcat into gear, heading back. 20 kilometers from the base, he met the convoy. 4 massive snow crawlers loaded with personnel, trailed by military Humvees. A spotter flagged him down. Rowan recognized Chief Lennox, wearing full hazmat gear. "Dr. Stevens," Lennox shouted over the engine din. "Turn around. Operation Sundown is active." "What did you bury down there?" Rowan demanded. "What's hatching?" Lennox's visor hid his eyes. "No more questions. We torch the site, we move north." Behind him, soldiers unpacked flamethrowers. He could see barrels marked napalm gel. Rowan's sensor data scrolled across his field laptop. The oscillation readings spiked into the red. "It's too late," Rowan said softly. "Whatever's under the ice is surfacing." And then, the ground bucked. An earthquake's growl lifted the snowcat's treads. Far behind them, a white ridge ruptured, vomiting a column of supercooled mist into the stars. From its base, something rose. Segment after segment of ridged, bone-pale carapace, like the tapered tower of an impossible spine. The soldiers froze. Lennox whispered, "Mother of..." The creature's torso breached. A bulging thorax lined in bioluminescent ribs, each pulse echoing the seismic heartbeat. Its head followed. Faceted eyes the size of shipping containers. Mandibles dripping translucent goo that hissed as it hit the snow. Flamethrowers spit arcs of fire. The napalm splashed against armor, igniting with roaring whoops. But the creature barely slowed. It opened its jaws and exhaled a sub-bass roar that knocked Rowan flat, his ears bleeding. Through blurred vision, he saw the convoy erupt into flame, soldiers being flung like rag dolls. He heard vehicles skidding and metal twisting. Rowan gunned the snowcat in reverse, careening across the ice field as the creature's legs, jointed like mammoth scythes, clambered over the wreckage. And then he saw more breaches along the horizon, smaller but multiplying, each a new spire of chitin piercing the ice. He ran the throttle until the engine shrieked. In the rearview mirror, the first monster loomed, silhouetted against the scarlet aurora with burning napalm. It dipped its head, mandibles plunging into the snow, extracting a half-melted Humvee that squealed like tin foil. Rowan's GPS pointed 60 kilometers north to the emergency runway, the only hope for an outbound transport. The radio crackled. A lone voice came through.
"Stevens, if that's you, runway compromised. They're everywhere. We shouldn't have mined the old station. They remember."
The transmission drowned in static. Rowan drove on through black winter. The snowcat's fuel gauge hovered near empty, and the unseen brood behind him continued to hatch under the silence of Antarctica. Rowan coaxed the snowcat's failing engine across a salt-white plain veiled in drifting hoarfrost. 2 ridgelines away, towering silhouettes punched through moonlit mist. More hatchlings, their pulsing thoraces echoing the continental heartbeat through the crust. He reached the runway perimeter near 3 a.m. It should have been ablaze with sodium lamps and humming generators, but the whole airfield lay black. The only light came from a wrecked Hercules, half embedded in a snow berm, its wings bent like a broken prayer. The plane's auxiliary beacon still blinked, bathing the fuselage in rhythmic blood-red flashes. Rowan killed the snowcat and listened. Nothing but distant thunder, the tearing ice, and that infrasonic drone he now recognized as the creature's arterial cadence. A lopsided hangar yawned open downwind. Inside, a sliver of LED glow hinted at life. He grabbed his laptop, field recorder and a flare pistol, then staggered through knee-deep drift towards the half-lit building. A barricade of supply crates blocked the entrance. Rowan rapped with a multi-tool. The crate shifted, a narrow gap peeled open, revealing two terrified faces in red parkas. Biomedical tech Adele Gupta and airframe mechanic Isaac Boone. People Rowan knew only by cafeteria nods. Isaac waved him in and slid a pallet across the breach. The hangar interior was unreal. Expeditioners in mismatched survival gear huddled around space heaters. Maybe 30 souls in total. A stocky Air National Guard pilot, Major Felix Rojas, stood over a sap green console, patched into a ground-penetrating radar unit. A live map displayed crimson nodes radiating from McMurdo like cancer. Every few seconds, a new dot blossomed. "Stevens, right?" Rojas barked. "You were off-grid. Glad you made it." "I found one of the nests," Rowan rasped, lungs raw with ice dust. "There isn't one of them. There's a brood. Your fire won't stop them." "We figured," Adele said, eyes purple with sleeplessness. She pointed at a side table, stacked with manila folders stamped "Sec Def Eyes Only." "We've been decrypting Lennox's Sundown documents. You need to see." Rowan flipped the pages, scanning grainy photographs dated Jan 1963. Project Maelstrom. Men in navy dress stood beside the same smooth ice tunnel Rowan had fallen through. Only back then, searchlights and giant heaters rimmed the hole. Engineers welded an iron lattice over the opening. The weld seams glowed white hot. A typed caption read, "Specimen colony, located 112 meters beneath blue ice lens. Hypometabolic, but reactive to light and vibration. Lattice installed. Site flooded and rapid freeze protocols executed. Containment threshold, 60 years, conservative." Another memo, 1970. "Minimal subsurface activity. Recommend indefinite monitoring." Then, 1992. "Budget cuts. Station decommissioned. Data archived." Finally, a chilling addendum dated 2015. "Seismic reflux increasing. Recommend Operation Sundown. Thermite charges at 140 meters. Objective, glass the nest." Rowan slammed the file shut. "They tried to burn out an alien colony and only cracked the shell. The heat probably accelerated gestation." Adele pointed at the live radar. "We think the thermite melted pockets of it, filled them with water that refroze as translucent ice. Over decades, those pods incubated." Isaac cursed under his breath. "So what stops them now?" Rowan's mind raced. "They're subglacial organisms, adapted to darkness, pressure, -50 temps. Sunlight hurt the first hatchling after napalm cooked its armor, so maybe heat plus UV can disrupt them." Rojas gestured to the torn-up Hercules outside. "That C-130 has functional auxiliary power and one working engine. Enough to taxi, but not fly. But the tail boom holds a laser. Class 4 UV emitter. Used for ozone studies. And McMurdo's main runway lights have diesel generators," Adele added. "If we tow the laser onto the runway, crank the bulbs, we could flood the area with UV. Like luring moths to a porch light," Rowan finished, hope flickering. Isaac checked his watch. "We've got about 90 minutes of darkness left. After that, the sun skims the horizon for hours. Plenty of natural UV." Rowan shook his head. "Their exoskeleton reflects visible light, but maybe not UVA. We need to get this done ourselves. Rojas exhaled. Okay, we rig the plane, power the laser, and pray the runway generators haven't been gooped. As if on cue, the floor vibrated. A ripple of seismic breath, stronger than before. Someone screamed by the barricade. The crates bulged inward as a glossy stinger punched through the wood, snapping boards like a pencil. Rowan fired the flare pistol. The magnesium bloom forced the appendage back, sizzling flesh. "Clock's ticking," Rojas roared. "Move!" A comms tech hotwired 2 skidoos to pull crate sleds stacked with diesel drums, jumper cables and spotlights. Isaac and Adele donned welding masks to handle the UV lens. Rowan shouldered his field laptop, still logging seismic pulses. The interval was now just 8 hours. The colony's heartbeat was accelerating. They burst from the hangar into -40 air. The convoy crept across the frozen apron towards the Hercules. The runway ahead was a nightmare. Asphalt was shredded by car-sized claws. Refrozen puddles were peppered with half-melted electronics. Yet the strip generator shacks looked intact, but coated in tar. 2 volunteers lugged flamethrowers, torching any tar patch that twitched. The slime recoiled, but larger clots began oozing from under snowbanks, coalescing into new hatchlings. Smaller than the first Titan, but still nightmare large. Their bodies crystalline with newly hardened plates. Rowan and Isaac climbed the Hercules ladder. The cockpit reeked of stale coffee and charred wiring. Rojas fired it up, and it coughed into life. One engine spooled enough to rotate the craft 40 degrees, pointing the laser down the runway's throat. "Laser at 10%, Adele called over the headset. "Spool in 30. Rowan glanced outside. The smaller hatchlings screeched at the sudden light, chitins smoking in ultraviolet glare. They stampeded towards the plane, their mandibles gaping. Flamers unleashed sheets of fire, buying seconds. Rowan rushed to the cargo bay, yanking open a side hatch. He mounted his laptop on the bulkhead. His geophone feed spiked again. Another massive rupture imminent, directly beneath the runway. "Rojas, we've got a big one coming up," he warned. Rojas gritted his teeth. "Then we give it the sun before it breaches." "Laser at full," Adele shouted. "Firing!" A column of invisible radiation lanced down the tarmac. Where it struck, tar organisms blistered, their exoskeletons splitting like overheated glass. Screeches cut through the jet noise like butter. Suddenly, a shockwave jacked the aircraft sideways. A fissure erupted beneath the starboard gear. Towering from it rose the first Titan, Rowan's earlier nightmare. Its jaws snapping cables like floss. Its dorsal plates now glittered with mirror-slick UV reflective slime. The creature lunged towards them, its jaws puncturing the fuselage just aft of the cockpit, severing control lines. The plane listed. The laser dipped off axis, scorching ice uselessly. Inside the bay, Rowan's laptop alarm screamed. Ground uplift spiked exactly beneath the runway generators. Another behemoth about to surface would destroy the whole light array. Rowan yanked open an emergency locker, hauling out a parachute flare rocket. Designed for 300 meters altitude. An idea sparked. A desperate, insane idea. He loaded the flare into the launcher, taped his last magnesium handheld flare to it for an extra burn, then scrambled out onto the cracked wing. Down below, volunteers retreated. Fire spread where napalm drums ruptured. Rowan steadied the launcher towards the gaping fissure at the runway's midline. He exhaled a puff of frozen vapour. "For science," he muttered, and squeezed the trigger. The rocket whooshed, arcing into the chasm just as the second Titan's head emerged. The magnesium ignited on impact, white hotter than the sun's surface, flooding the moor with radiant heat and UV. The creature stiffened, shrieking, steam jetting from its joints. Then its thorax convulsed, imploding in on itself like a collapsing lung. Segments shattered, raining obsidian shards that hissed on the snow. "Rowan, get in!" Isaac yelled through a hull breach. Rowan leapt back into the bay, rolling across tie-down rails. Inside, Adele's laptop beeped. The seismograph line plummeted. The continental heartbeat was faltering. Each creature's fall dulled the pulse further. They exchanged a breathless realization. Kill the queens, kill the colony. But readings also showed a remaining supernode under McMurdo itself, the primary queen, Rowan's first discovery site. If that queen surfaced unchecked, her armour would already be UV-proof. The military had exhausted their napalm reserves. The laser was their only hope. They'd need to drag the crippled Hercules and its invaluable emitter back towards the base, across churned ice, before sunrise lost its lethal edge. Rojas made the call. "We tow on one prop and pray the skis hold." As they crawled towards McMurdo, smaller hatchlings pursued, but dared not to cross the flood of UV. The convoy left a sizzling wake. Still, the team could feel the Queen's summons, the ground vibrating, pods bursting miles away. 30 agonizing minutes later, they crested a ridge overlooking the station. McMurdo was nearly unrecognizable. Buildings cocooned, comms towers had fallen. At the airfield's center yawned a sinkhole glowing a sickly green. "That's her," Rowan said, his stomach dropping. The backup generators that once powered McMurdo's labs lay half swallowed by tar, but their diesel tanks were intact. Rojas parked the Hercules facing the pit, aligning the UV emitter. Meanwhile, Isaac and a demolition tech rigged C4 bundles to the generator tanks, enough to vaporize a city block. "Light her up. Drop the hammer," Isaac instructed. The first crimson blush of polar dawn seeped over the horizon. They were out of time. Rowan manned the laser console. Adele fine-tuned the optics. "This is only going to last for 90 seconds, she warned. "Make it count." Rowan pressed fire. A violet beam stabbed into the sinkhole. The glacier quaked. Tar boils erupted. Then the Queen rose. She must have towered at least 50 meters tall. The crew stood there with their mouths open for a brief moment, in complete awe. She shrieked, a resonant chord that rattled the crew's jawbones. "Hold the beam," Adele cried. The Queen's armour blistered. She reared, her mandibles wide.
"Charges ready,"
Isaac radioed. He had 30 seconds to clear. Then, everything went wrong at once. The emitter lens shattered with a crystalline scream, fried after 70 seconds. The beam died. The Queen slammed one claw forward, shearing the Hercules' tail completely off. Rowan and Adele tumbled, console sparks showering them. The fuel lines also ruptured, igniting pools of flame under the fuselage. Rowan saw the Queen pivot to devour the plane. He made a choice. He sprinted through smoke to the bomb shackles, grabbed a live napalm canister leaking gel, and stumbled towards the generator tanks where Isaac fought a drone. Rowan smashed the canister at the Queen's scabbed foreleg, coating it in gel. He lit a flare and jammed it into the oozing napalm, then tackled Isaac behind a snowbank. The gel erupted up the Queen's limb to her thorax. It burned hotter than the sun. She thrashed violently. Her mirror plates cracked, exposing pulsing membranes beneath. With a dying heave, she collapsed onto the generator tanks. Isaac thumbed the detonator. The explosion split the polar dawn. Shockwaves snowblasted the ridge, flipping Rowan and Isaac onto their backs. When their ears cleared, they saw the crater where the Queen had been, smouldering with blue fire. The continental pulse on Rowan's laptop flatlined. And with that, wind returned. Real wind. The silence at last lifted. The air filled with a subliminal chew of ice shards and distant waves cracking onto Ross Sea. Adele limped over, supporting Rockass. Survivors counted barely a dozen. But the sky, for the first time in nights, brightened to the normal Antarctic glow. They spent hours torching husks and sealing fissures with quickset cement before a rescue chopper finally landed. There was global chatter all over the comms. Similar nests had surfaced near Vostok and Amundsen Scott, but without Queens they writhed aimlessly, freezing in the daylight. Rockass, soot-smeared, asked Rowan, "What now, Doc?" Rowan stared at the horizon, where steam curled from newborn calderas. "We publish everything. We tell the world the truth. And we never let them forget why we should let this place stay uninhabited."